I've stated many times that Scream is my favorite horror movie ever, and today I want to talk all about it. So, spoiler warning for the entire movie, obviously. Also, sort of spoilers for the preceding three movies after. I do mention some things from them, but they're not super spoilery, so you should be okay. Also, stick around for the end of this two-part series where I will talk a little bit about the latest news in the Scream 5 movie. I know we're all very excited to see where that's headed. If you like this content, by the way, and want more, please think about hitting that subscribe button and turning on those notifications. All right, let's get to the discussion. Scream, made by the master of horror himself, the late Wes Craven, is a 1996 horror film about a sadistic killer who wears the iconic ghost face mask while they stalk and murder. What I love most about Scream is the opening scene, and I think that can be said for most fans of the series. The opening scene of Scream is one of the most well-known sequences in horror history, in my opinion at least. It kind of set the stage for a lot of modern horror, and I really appreciate that. We start off with Casey Becker getting ready to watch a scary movie with her boyfriend who's on his way when she gets a call from a stranger. He torments her on the phone for a while as we see the crazy events unfold on screen, and she and her boyfriend are eventually killed by the masked man himself. What I love is that the marketing for this movie, even the movie poster, like if you own a copy of the DVD like I do, I own all of the Scream movies on DVD. If you look, Drew Barrymore, the actress who plays Casey Becker, she's front and center. She's the most prevalent, she's the largest face on the poster. All the audience at this point have every reason to believe that Casey is the final girl because she is the most marketed character, at least in my eyes. And the coin term for final girl is the one main character who survives the whole movie. More than likely, and pretty much always a girl. That's why we call them the final girl. It's a trope in horror, but it's an appreciated trope, and I'm glad that they haven't really broken this as much. I do like it when they deviate in gender identity and such like that, but I like the idea of female empowerment with them being the final girl. I don't always agree with some of the tropes that come with being the final girl, though, but that's an entirely different discussion that I want to have an entirely different day. So, Wes Craven is known for doing things similar to this opening scene and similar to this idea or belief that we are seeing our lead girl when we actually aren't. He actually accomplished this with the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, the first character that we're introduced to. We think that girl is going to be our leading role, but then she dies very, very quickly into the movie. But this factor wasn't really noticed until Scream and its popularity. Drew Barrymore played Casey, as I mentioned earlier, and while it's true that she was supposed to be the penultimate final girl, she actually had to film something else and couldn't commit to the time for the whole Scream production, so she chose to play Casey Becker's role. Something else I found cool was that to get herself terrified and into the role, she never met the person voicing Ghostface on the phone until after filming. So they didn't have Billy or Stu's actors actually talking on the phone, actually voicing Ghostface. That was done by an entirely different actor. And I thought this was a genius idea because it makes her even more convincing in the film, and it makes the opening scene that much better because she's genuinely terrified. Because she can't place a face to the voice, so it's kind of scary to just be speaking with someone who you've never met before. So I really appreciate that little thing that she did for the movie. I think it helped her with her acting as well in it, and made the scene as so good. It's so iconic. It's literally it's one of the reasons why Scream is one of my favorite movies. Well, is my favorite horror movie and one of my favorite movies of all time. So, getting back into Scream. Right after this opening scene, and then the parents freaking out, and the pan in, zoom in, that famous zoom in shot on Casey Becker. It's they They actually had to do that cut zoom in shot because of the ratings board was kind of getting on them for this opening scene because it was very graphic and very sad because while she's dying, her parents can actually hear her breath on the phone because she's still holding onto the phone. Because the phone lines are, if you ever have had a home phone, like one of those old school house phones. I know I had one growing up. My dad still has one. If you start talking on the phone and you hang up and you're still on the line, and someone else in the house picks up another line, you can talk to each other. So the parents picked up a line in the house and it was her voice. They were going to call 911, but they heard her voice instead, her whimpering last breaths before she died. And then she was strung up on that tree. And that panning in shot that was super, super fast, and then that strike of lightning, they had to do that shot because of the ratings board, because this movie was getting to be a little much, even just for the opening scene. But I honestly don't think it's that terrifying, but whatever. Ratings board back then was a little bit more harsh with their judgment, I suppose. So right after this scene, we get introduced to our actual final girl, Sydney Prescott. And right away, we also meet her boyfriend, the very suspicious Billy Loomis. Suspicious, I say, because he climbs into her window, like, right after the events of what just transpired, and he's out of breath, which is kind of weird. It's like, you're just climbing up a window. Take your time. You don't have to get out of breath to come through someone's window. So he pressures Sydney into fooling around a little bit, but she doesn't want to go all the way. Smart girl, if you ask me, in any situation. Don't feel peer pressure to do things like that with guys. So, interesting side note that I noticed from this scene after watching the movie for like the sixth time to make this video, like the sixth time in the past couple of years. I watched this movie a lot. The music in the background, if you listen to it closely, the score music, it's a very soft rendition of Don't Fear the Reaper. I don't know if you know that song. If you don't, look it up. I can't play it here because copyright, obviously. I never noticed this touch until after watching the movie, like I said a few times. I really liked it because the movie wants us to suspect Billy from the get-go, from the start. This is established in many subtle ways in this scene that I appreciate, like him coming in out of breath and seemingly like tired, and all he did was climb a window, so he's not going to be that tired from climbing. I don't even care if it's a second-story window. You're not going to be out of breath for that long after climbing a window. And I love that subtle "Don't fear the Reaper." It's so good because this movie, the whole point of Scream in the series is that everyone is a suspect. It's just like one of the characters in the movie that I'll talk about in a minute. He talks about the tropes of a horror movie, and then there are scenes where he mentions everyone is a suspect, even himself. So they want to establish this. They want you to suspect literally everyone. And I think it's genius how they're subtly just giving us these drops or these hints that it could possibly be this character. Just by the music and the tone of the scene, I think it's perfect. Very nicely done. So, in the next main scene, we're introduced to the main characters of the movie. We've already met Sydney, but there's also Stu, Randy, Tatum, and then, of course, like I said, Billy and Sydney. So they're discussing who could have killed their classmates and why. It's all anyone can talk about right now. I mean, there's police at the school. Everyone's been talking to the students. Sydney had to sit down with the police. We all get a supposed established alibi from Stu and Tatum, who were together that night, and then also from Randy stating that he was at work. So this is a part of the movie where they're trying to establish alibis for characters. So this scene is important. It's trying to get us to lean toward a certain person or believe that a certain person could be suspicious, and that would be Billy, because we don't know where he was that night before he snuck through Sydney's window right before it happened. So we know that Sydney was at home because her father was there. So she technically has an alibi because her father was in that scene earlier checking on her when she heard her scream from, or just have a start from Billy coming through the window so suddenly. So after the scene, Sydney goes home, and we get another plot device with her when the news is reporting the double murder of the teens, and it mentions that this time last year, her own mother was raped and murdered. So interesting that they happened so close to each other, isn't it? It could mean something very important. Sydney is home alone because her father, as we know from the earlier scene where he went into her room, he told her that he's going on a business trip and he'd be staying at a hotel. So this, after she takes a nap, is when we get our first interaction with the killer and Sydney, when the killer calls her, because this is his MO. He calls, he asks you what your favorite scary movie is, that's his thing. So he taunts Sydney and gets her to go outside so he can sneak inside of her house. And once she freaks out enough after he talks about her mother over the phone, she runs back inside the house and locks the doors. And she does the regular lock, and she does those. Her door had one of those old school apartment locks on it, so it was one of the chain locks. They're very hard to unlock in a hurry. So she locks the doors, and then we get this view of Ghostface coming out of the hall closet and attacking her. And she fends him off downstairs, and she does something that she told him over the phone when he asked her what her favorite scary movie is. She said, "I don't like them because they're so predictable. There's just this big-breasted girl," and she runs up the stairs instead of running out the door like she should. It's so insulting. So she has to do the exact same thing she said was dumb because her door was bolted shut. And she couldn't open it in a moment's notice because he was right there at the door with her. So her only choice was to run upstairs. Or her only choice in that moment. So it really goes to show us that sometimes your only choice is to do that. So she does this. She runs upstairs and she locks herself in her room. And as she's doing this, she can't use the phone because obviously they probably cut the lines on the phone or did something so she couldn't use them. So she gets on her computer and she does something that I've never seen someone do in a horror movie before that I thought was super cool at the time. She uses her computer to call 911. Now, this is something you can actually do, and the reason why they have this is for people who are deaf or hard of hearing when they need help in an emergency. You can call 911 using your computer. It's entirely possible. So I think it's really cool that they put it in this movie because it was something relatively new back then because computers were just becoming a thing, like a popular thing to have in your home in the mid to late 90s. I should know. I'm a 90s kid. So smartly, when she calls the police, calls 911, the killer sees her do it through the crack in the door. He runs away, and as he disappears, as she turns around, he's gone. Immediately, we get one of those classic little jump scares where Billy shoots through her window. And she hugs him. She says the killer was in the house. And as she's hugging him, a cell phone drops out of his pocket. Obviously, someone was calling her with a cellular device. So right now, we get that another thing to be suspicious about. So smartly, instead of staying with Billy, Sydney runs to her front door, opens it, and this is where we get a proper introduction for my personal favorite character in the Scream series, the police officer and Tatum's older brother, Dewey Riley. He is so fantastic. David Arquette is just so lovely. I love his acting. I love him in this role. He was perfect for it. He originally wasn't even supposed to have this role. He was supposed to have something else entirely, but I'm so glad that they cast him for this role. He convinced them that it would be so much better to have like this clumsy, little fun, loving kind of cop around than it would be to have like a tough, no-nonsense kind. So I'm really glad he got this role. And he's a fun take on the police officer, and he's a lovable character, and you actually care about him, which is appreciative. Because a lot of times in horror movies, we don't really care what happens to the characters. Let's be honest. We're just here to see someone get killed in cool special effects most of the time. But these movies try to make you care about their characters, which I appreciate. After she gets taken away to the police station, we also get introduced to another important character in the series, another one of the main characters of the series, Gale Weathers. She's a news reporter who's obsessed with Sydney because of her mother's death. She's trying to she is writing a book about the court proceedings and everything that happened because they supposedly caught the person who murdered her mother through Sydney's testimony. So Gail's always interested in talking to Sydney about this, and Sydney wants nothing to do with Gail because she's so mean and pushy to her. And she's wanting to garner just fame from Sydney's situation, from her sadness, from her loss, and it's just depraving. It's really awful, honestly. Though Gail is really awful in the beginning of the movie, as it progresses, she becomes a more sympathetic character, and I enjoy her character growth throughout the series as a whole. Um, she really does have a lot of character development. That's another thing that's nice about these movies, even though the sequels might not be as good as the original. There's a lot of character development with the main three. The main three would be Sydney, Dewey, and Gail. There's a lot of really good character development, really solid, especially for Gail. She realizes that she's being a complete dick, and she decides to change her ways and actually cares about Sydney. And I'm excited to see what she'll be like in Scream 5 because at this point, to me personally, she's kind of become a surrogate mother in a way for Sydney because she really does care about her safety, especially prevalent. We can really see this in the fourth movie. It's just very obvious she actually really does care for Sydney at this point because she really wants to help make sure that she's safe. So I'm appreciative of that. So they arrest Billy, rightfully so, because he did just jump into her house right after some murderer tried to kill her. And he stays in the police precinct overnight while Sydney goes to Tatum's house and stays with them so Dewey can keep her safe, while her father isn't there because, strangely enough, they can't get a hold of him at the hotel he supposedly told Sydney he was going to stay at. So that night at Tatum's house, the killer actually calls Sydney again. And at this point, we're like, oh, it can't be Billy. He's at the police station. He can't call anyone. And I would tell you an answer to that. And Randy would say the same thing if he were here. Wrong. You never assume anything in scary movies. You'll be thrown for a loop. And this is very true with Scream. The whole point of the movie, the whole point of the series is to always suspect everyone. Everyone's a suspect. As quoting from the Scream TV series, one of the main characters from that said that in one of the first few episodes. Everyone's a suspect. And it's so true. So I am going to stop this part of the video right here because it's starting to get really long. And if you want to hear how this ends and also hear my updates for Scream 5, come check in tomorrow and I will have everything posted for you on our loveliest of all spooky days. Everyone have a great Halloween, and I will see you all next time. Until then.